Welcome to the Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Merav Marciano on CJAD 800.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a happy belated Saint Jean-Baptiste and a happy Canada Day coming up to everyone. You're listening to The Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Terry Kilakos, a chartered real estate and mortgage broker, as well as president and founder of Northeast Real Estate and Mortgage Agency. And today we're talking about what you need to know before buying a cottage. I love that sound. I'm sorry. I had to play it. I know it's kind of weird and cheesy, but that's my that's the loon calls. It was either I play it on my phone, Merav, or I attempt to do it,
Or you bring a real loon into the studio.
I think that there would be a couple of activists that would have something to say about that. Yeah, we're going to be talking about, what you need to know before buying a cottage. With borders closed, many people are contemplating on buying a country house. So today we're going to be looking at some important details you should be looking at before you buy. Joining me, the voice that you guys heard, that's my beautiful co-host and wife, Merav Marciano, chartered real estate and mortgage broker and vice president of Northeast. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
You can always reach us during the week at the office at 514-680-4674, or you can visit us online at northeastmortgages.ca. And if you haven't done so already, the loons are going to get you.
You always lower your voice.
I know.
And you haven't done so already.
I was going to say something, but it was okay. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is newsonthego.ca. Otherwise, if you don't subscribe, I'm sicking the loons at you. So there you go.
Loons are nice.
They're nice until you mess with them and they actually... Anyways, okay.
Don't mess with their kids. That's the most
yeah, exactly. Before we kick off the show, I do want to do a little bit of a market update, kind of see what's going on in the markets. I was taking a look actually at the Bank of Canada's stats this week, and what do I see? Inflation is down, and it's down big time. I mean, we're in negative territory here. And the last time that I saw inflation in negative territories was right after 2008, which is an indicator that things are
heading
not
towards a recession.
It is possible. I mean, we've talked about this, right? If you've listened long enough in the show, you'll know that I've always said that end of 2020, beginning of 2021, this is when we're going to be looking and seeing a recession hit Canada. Recessions are cyclical. We're in the cycle right now. This is the time period. COVID obviously didn't help matters. It kind of forced things along a little bit. We'll see. We'll see what happens over the next little while. One of the big things that's actually driving inflation down is the price of gas. So the price of gasoline, it was a big thing. It's what actually was keeping inflation up. Before, I've always said that inflation was artificially high because of the price at the pumps, and now we're seeing the price drop. So now we're seeing inflation go back down to where it is. If you remove that out of the equation, I think inflation is around 0.7, which is above zero. What does that all mean for people that have mortgages? Well, when inflation drops, the Bank of Canada cuts the overnight rate to basically stimulate things.
Do you think they're going to be doing that again? They've done it twice through an emergency measure during COVID-19.
I think they were a little quick on dropping the rates.
That's what I'm thinking too.
I think that, if we look back, we see that rates, they had raised them, I think, a little bit too fast at one point. And I think they lowered them too fast. I think there's someone there that's pulling the trigger a little bit too quickly. Right now, if they need to put the brakes on where inflation is going, if it's going downhill, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go to zero, or they're going to have to go into the negative territory, which they do have the ability to do that. But whether or not they're going to do that, I think it kind of remains to be seen. We'll see what happens over the next little while. If inflation continues down this path, on this trajectory, I don't I don't see. It sounded like I was about to cry there, but I had something like stuck in my throat.
I was like, "Wow, he's taking this really like to an emotional level there."
It's gonna be so sad, but it is possible. Okay, so it remains to be seen what's gonna happen.
I think it's very hard to predict what's coming up.
And the other thing on the real estate side, what's going on that?
Look, with respect to homes, the prices are just crazy. Yes, there wasn't a lot of inventory. So definitely when you look at the numbers and you look at the headlines, there was really, really a reduced amount of listings out there, which, obviously the less listings there are, the more competition there is for each property that's out there, which means, you've got one house that goes on the market, you've got 10 people interested in it. That's and right. Putting in offers. What does that create? Competition, and prices go up. Yeah. So for now, we don't see what the economists are predicting, a drop of 9% in real estate between 2020 and 2021. Now, that could happen if we see more tightening in the rules, which we've seen in 2009. We've seen it in 2016. Yeah. We see it all the time when there's any kind of economic pressure being put on the real estate market. That's when we see prices being affected more so than COVID or anything like that. So again, I don't know what the government has up its sleeve for the near future. If there is something like that in their view for the near future, then definitely it might affect the prices. But for now, we're not seeing that at all. Prices are actually on the rise. So
it's interesting because we usually do a show about buying cottages of this time of year, but I think that this year it actually lines up better than any other year that we've ever done a show about cottage buying. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the main reasons is because people are just so fed up with the prices of houses in Montreal, right? So I've had friends, I have had clients, I have had colleagues who were thinking about buying properties, whether it was investment properties, whether it was anything like that. And they basically, when this whole thing happened, they said, forget it. I'm not able to go to the States. I'm not able to go here. People couldn't even go to Toronto, like they were getting stopped on the highways. So they're not able to go anywhere. They're stuck here and they're saying, well, you know what? Let's make the most of it. Let's buy a country house. And this is one of the things that we've been seeing because of where the market has been going in Montreal. People that were thinking about buying country houses for, an investment property, they're not able to, right? Because the prices are so high and the rents are not they're not conducive. Yes. But yet, if you buy a country house, you're able to get to enjoy it a little bit, and at the same time rent it out and get some revenue. It's very much in demand. Very much in demand now. Airbnbs and all that. It's Airbnbs. Airbnbs. It's very much in demand, the country houses, because it's really like it's a mini vacation. You're on the lake. Yep. You've got nature. You've got the sun. You've got everything you need. Absolutely. Although I do have just we're pushing up against the clock here, but I do have a really funny story that happened this week, which I have to share it, and it's along the lines of cottage life, and then we're going to dive into the show after traffic. But I had a client that calls me up and he says, I want to buy a country house. And I'm like, great. So I sat down with him. I kind of pre-approved him, ran through the numbers with him, gave him some advice, and he's like, okay, great. I'm on my way up north. we're going to make an offer today. So I'm like, excellent. Then he calls me up after and he says to me, so I decided I'm not going to buy the country house. And I was like, oh, okay, you're going to look for another one? He's like, no. He's like, I'm just going to, I'm going to buy a house in the city. And I said, okay. I'm like, okay, great. I'm like, what changed your mind? He goes, I realized I don't like the country. So I was like, you definitely have to like the country. I was like, what the hell? Why did you even think about buying a country house? Anyways, coming up, we're going to be looking at the different water systems in your country house and what you should be looking for. Now we're going to take a small detour off to the CJAD Traffic Center.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Merav Marciano on CJAD 800.
You're
listening to The Real Estate Show on CJAD 800, and today we're looking at the pros and cons of buying a cottage. I love the cottage life personally. I think, Merav, you were more of a city girl, and I convinced you to buy a country house years ago, and it was probably one of the best decisions that we ever did. You know, a country house is an escape, and at the same time, it's an investment in your spiritual well-being, if you will. I've always kind of made the joke that it increased my lifespan by about 10 years buying that place.
But it's absolutely true. And we used to live in the city.
That's right.
And now we live in the suburbs.
Hold on. We still live in the city. I know,
that's what I was going to say. We live in the suburbs now, which I consider it more, calm, relaxed. But we lived like in the heart of the city with a busy street, right near downtown. And definitely when we would go up north, that was quite the escape. What a difference. The peace, the lake, the nature. So
just to share with you guys a little bit of our experience, we lived in Myland, right, for the better part of, kind of the beginning of our relationship. And even when, we had a couple of our munchkins, we were still living in Myland. And, big house, but tiny backyard. Obviously no pool, no kind of special little amenities in the house. We had a park nearby, but that was about it. So whenever the kids wanted to go out, we were always worried. They were playing in the streets. It wasn't the same. There
was no playing in the street.
There was no play. Yeah, Merav was very strict. You can't go out. Only go from one fence post to the next. Yeah. Okay. Anyways,
that's really, I remember that.
Yeah. So you can only ride your bike from one end of the fence to the other. So it became very difficult for us to, for the kids to kind of grow a little bit. So we decided to buy our country house, and they, their wings spread at that point. They were able to run around. They were able to play. They were able to swim. We have a canoe. They were able to do all kinds of
learn how to ride with no training wheels.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where they learn.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of incredible memories that we made at that country house. And then as the kids started to get older and we moved to the suburbs, it became less and less of a, how can I say it?
A need
to go out to the country. But interestingly enough, our teenager who drives, and now he's an adult, but he started going to the country more. And this is the cycle that we end up seeing with country houses. You have when the kids are young, people, are constantly going up every weekend, but then as the kids start to get older, you slow down, but the kids start to use it. And then eventually the kids stop using it and the parents go back to using it, to kind of get away from the city. Every single person that I know that has a country house, and that's had it for an extended period of time, this is the cycle that they've always used. And I think you kind of agree with that. Right?
And we do know some friends who we've seen that with. They used it a lot. Then they slowed down, and then their kids who got older started going. So definitely I've seen that cycle. And I think it's just we have to understand that this is it becomes like a family getaway home.
Exactly.
But you could also rent it during times
when you're not using it. So let's look at one of the most important things when you're actually buying a country house. And that would be, what would you say?
Using a realtor who knows what they're doing.
So we always talk about how important it is whenever you're buying a property that you always need to be represented by someone. And buying a country house,
oh my goodness,
is
imperative.
Paramount.
Yes.
I mean, it is
going straight to the listing broker would be a huge mistake, especially if you're a city person and you don't know much about country houses. That would be a big mistake.
Exactly. So you need to find a realtor that's actually, we have realtors in our office that are very good at, helping clients buy country houses. And I'm going to go back to when we bought our first place, and we had our own realtor. So we came in with a realtor. And even with that, the real estate broker that was selling the properties, they were trying to not swindle us, but they have a different way of working in the country, right? And I'm referring to the water test, right? And you're laughing because
I am totally
go for it. Share the story.
So when you buy a country house, one of the things that the financial institution wants to see is that your water is drinkable.
Exactly.
Well, the realtor had a really great idea around that, which is
not our realtor.
No,
the
listing realtor. I apologize for not making that clear. The listing broker decided that, hey, look, anyways, we take water, we send it to a facility to get tested. If you want to make sure it passes for financing, we could just pour some bleach in here.
I could not believe it. And then to add an extra layer to that, she said, if you have mosquitoes, just dump bleach in the lake. I was mortified. I couldn't believe that this woman was saying that. And I'm not going to mention what she does for a living because people are going to know exactly who she is. And it's as far, anyways, it's criminal. Okay. Like it's complete fraud. You can't do that. But this is important. And that kind of actually brings us to, the different types of water that you can have at a country house, right? So, you have well water, okay, and you can have a shallow or you can have a deep well, you can have artesian wells, you can have water that's coming from a lake, and all of the different ways of getting water are fine, including lake water. It's just whether or not it's going to, what the taste is going to be.
But I mean, would a bank finance something that has lake water?
They would. Yeah,
so then
absolutely.
Why do we do a drinking test?
Because they want to make sure that the water is potable. Oddly enough,
you could drink lake water?
Yeah, you could drink it. You pass it through some filters, get rid of some sediments. It's drinkable, as crazy as it is. And mind you, it depends on the lake. If you have a lake that's has boats on it, well, in a case like that, you're going to have some pollution in the water. And most of the time when the lake has a boat on it, has boats on it, you're not going to find people drinking out of the lake. But, a lake like ours, which is non-navigable, right? So you have a body of water. There's no motorized boats. People can be on canoes and stuff like that. You could drink out of that lake. But it doesn't taste all that great. I mean, for me, the best tasting water comes from a shallow well, oddly enough. When you do artesian, when you go deep, and you do a deep well, it ends up free taste. When you have a shallow well, the water tastes really good, but you have the danger of runoff, right? So you end up having
more sediments or things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going through enough layers of rock.
Exactly. So, for us, what we end up doing in the country is we have our water. I mean, we're drinking it, but we also have jugs of water that we go to the local IGA and we just kind of fill them up, once. Yeah,
for cooking, I'll use the water straight from the tap. But when it comes to drinking, like a good glass of water, I definitely prefer.
Exactly. If you're buying a property, one of the things, especially when you're going country house, the big suggestion is title insurance. Okay. And I always suggest that people get title insurance when they're buying a property. We'll talk about that shortly. You're listening to the Real Estate Show on CJAD 800. Coming up, we're going to be looking at title insurance, your country houses, and what you need to know when you're actually buying that country house.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Merav Marciano on CJAD 800.
I love that sound. It's so peaceful, Merav, here.
It sounds like that loon is getting tortured, no?
It does sound a little torturing, but it's the loon calls. Anyways, it's my favorite sound in the country. That and the crazy frogs at night, but that's toads, whatever you want to call them. Before I get a whole bunch of emails from people saying, anyways. Thank you for joining us on The Real Estate Show. Today we're talking about the important things you need to know before buying a cottage. Feel free to visit us online at northeastmortgages.ca, or you can reach us at 514-680-4674.
Hence the loon sounds.
Because I'm a little loony. Anyways, okay.
So you wanted to mention title insurance. That is a good point.
Yeah, so when you're buying a country house, one of the most important things that you need to do is get title insurance.
What is title insurance?
So title insurance is something. It's an insurance policy that you're going to buy at the notary. It doesn't cost much. It could be as low as $150. I've seen them go as high as $400 or $500. Depends on the price. It depends on a few elements, but for the most part, it's not very expensive. But what it's going to do is it's going to protect you against deficiencies in the water. Okay, so if the water is not potable, title insurance can help out. If there's encroachments, which happens all the time in the country, and we've seen it even on our property.
Yes, they redrew the cadastrals.
Yeah, they redrew the lots, right? When some arpentergium, originally used to be, I can't say the word.
Arpenteur géomètre.
There you go.
Land
thank you.
surveyor.
Land surveyor. Okay, so, our lots used to be coming straight off the road, and then some guy decides to come in and say,
He's
hey,
a professional.
He's some guy, because what he did, he goes, it doesn't make sense for the lots to be coming off the road. They got to be facing north. I don't know. He's angled them, right?
So
and then
every single property is encroaching on the other.
Yeah, there's 22 houses around our lake, and each one encroaches on all the other ones. And then the city says, well, you know what? We'll put it back to the way it was. Everyone has to just, pay like $200 and we'll fix it. And
they're like, nope, don't want to pay $200.
There was a couple of people that said, no, we don't want to pay the $200. But there was that one guy on the lake that said, well, no, it doesn't make sense because I'm going to lose, because he ended up gaining land by that arpenteur person.
Land surveyor.
So yeah, that's
so the title insurance protects you against anything that has to do with your title.
Exactly.
So encroachments, water issues, obviously liens, illegal liens, legal liens, whatever.
Exactly. Absolutely. All that stuff. And it protects the bank. And a lot of times what you're going to find is the bank is going to actually oblige you to get it. Right. So let's talk a little bit about the financing side.
Yeah.
Of
so
things.
I did notice that banks are not crazy about 3-season chalets. Am I wrong?
You're right. So a lot of banks, you'll get financing for it, but it's going to come down to how much you're going to have to put down as a down payment. So most people, they think that when you're buying a country house, you have to put 20 or 25% down. I don't know where that comes from. It probably comes from the fact that some places are 3 seasons, and for those, a lot of times they're non-insurable, which means that CMHC or Genworth or one of the insurers won't step in. They won't insure it. So because they're not insuring the property, the bank is going to oblige you to put 20% down so that it becomes non-insurable, and then they'll lend you the money on it. When we're talking about a 4-season chalet,
so it's a house.
It's a house at that point. Whether you have a septic tank, whether you have well water, it doesn't matter. It's still a house. There's actually houses in the city or near the city that are running on septic tanks and wells. So in a case like that, what you're able to do is you're actually able to go with even a 5% down.
So even if you're already a homeowner.
Yep.
This is your second home.
Yep.
You could get away with putting 5%
Absolutely.
down.
It's considered a secondary home.
I think that's an important point, because a lot of folks out there are not aware that you could put as low as 5% down, which is really, really cool in this day and age to know that you can buy yourself a vacation home, a cottage.
That's right.
With such a little amount down.
Yeah. The important thing to remember, if you're going to be buying something at 5% down, then you can't do long-term rentals on it. Right? Because at that point, it's speculative. It's not something, you're not buying it for your pleasure. It's not a secondary residence. It's a speculative purchase.
Which is purely investment.
Purely investment. At that point, if you're going to buy it for rental purposes, then you need to put 20% down.
But if you're doing the odd Airbnb, I said it well, the odd
Airbnb, I'm sure that no one is going to say anything to you. Okay. But it depends on what its main purpose is, right? So actually, it actually brings up an important point as well. When you have a secondary residence, let's talk a little bit about capital gains.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't really kind of want to get into it too much. If you remember when we were talking about how to do the structure, I was like, I don't want to get into taxes, but I do want to talk about one thing. A secondary residence, you do have a taxable benefit when you sell it. Okay, so there will be capital gains that needs to be paid. However, because you're enjoying it, because you use the property, you can't write off the interest on the mortgage. So if I had a duplex, or if I had a condo or whatever I owned in the city, and I was renting it out, I would be able to write off the interest on it. But I can't write off the interest on my cottage, even though I'm going to have a capital gain down the line, because it is considered a secondary residence. So knowing that, if you decide to rent it out, then at that point, the portion so you have to divide the year up, right? So let's say you're using,
you need a really good accountant.
Well, let's say you're using it 50% of the time, and let's keep the math simple. You use it 50% of the time. You rent it out for 50% of the year. Then you can write off 50% of the interest
and 50% of the property taxes,
and 50% of everything,
renovations,
of everything,
and 50%.
of everything. Okay.
So you need an accountant who knows what he's doing.
Exactly.
To set that up.
Or Terry
for you.
Kilakos.
Well, we're not going to pretend we're accountants here.
I love. I know. You know what I love.
Rewind.
I love. Sorry, I just have to say one thing. The producer, as soon as I said that, I see his head like pop up. He's like,
"You're an accountant."
I'm not an accountant.
No.
Okay.
And we would never pretend to be accountants. So definitely you need a good accountant to make sure
100%.
you're getting the best tax benefit with respect to renting it out and how often you rent it out and all those good things. But with respect to financing, is there something that's definitely a no-no that banks don't like to see?
So again, 3 season versus 4 season, that's a big thing. If you have water that's not potable, so if it's not drinkable water, then they're going to force you to take title insurance. If the property is landlocked, which you end up finding stuff like that. That's
goodness.
Landlocked properties.
So you're right in the middle of a whole bunch of other lots.
Yeah, and exactly. And usually
you
what
need
you
to
have
walk
is
through a
rights.
different...
Exactly. You end up having like a right of access through people's property. Banks don't like that. Okay. So anytime that there's something weird about the property that's bizarre, they don't like that. The other thing that you want to be careful of when you're buying a property is you just have to make sure that country houses are empty most of the time. Rodents, ants, bugs, all kinds of stuff like that.
Squatters.
I don't know how many squatters will come in, but yeah, you're right.
But
absolutely.
Who knows? You leave your country house empty for 2-3 months.
Yeah, but these are the things that concern banks,
of course.
right? You got to think of a bank.
Roofs caving in winter for not cleaning the snow.
Yes, absolutely.
We've seen that personally.
Yeah, and insurance companies, you have to be careful, because if you've told the insurance company that you're going to be using it very often and you don't use it, then at that point the insurance company, if God forbid something happens, they can come back to you and say, excuse me,
yeah, you left it vacant for 3 months. You left it
vacant, exactly. Yeah. So because you left it vacant, we're not going to be insuring, we're not going to be paying for it. Stay tuned for more talk about buying a country house and what you should know before taking the plunge into the lake. You're listening to the Real Estate Show on CJAD 800. Now we're off to the CJAD Traffic Center.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Merav Marciano on CJAD 800.
Thanks for joining us. Today we're talking about cottages and how incredible they are.
You didn't put the loon sound.
I know I didn't put the loon sound. There you go. You're listening to The Real Estate Show on CJAD 800. And if you haven't done so already, take a moment, subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is newsonthego.ca. Otherwise, I'm sicking the loons at you. If you don't. There you go. Loons. I know.
So we were talking about renting it possibly part-time. So what do you do? Do you recommend renting it out while not in use?
I do, actually. But it all depends. Okay, it depends on the individual. Like, so if you were to ask me years ago, when we were using it, our country house every single weekend, if you were to ask me, Terry, would you rent out your cottage? I would say absolutely no. I would not rent it out because, maybe I'll let my parents or whoever stay there. But as far as anyone else, I don't want to rent it out. But then kind of as years go by and, you're using it less, why not? It's a vacant space. Why not rent it out? Why not make some money from Airbnb from it? But the things that are important to remember when you're doing that, you have to make sure that whatever happens in the country house, you have to be ready for it.
Yeah,
okay?
damage, things like that.
Think about who would be renting out a country house, right? It's not always, mom and pop and their kids that kind of want to go up there and spend a quiet weekend. A lot of times, and depending on the size of the country house,
it's a group of party animals.
It's a group of party animals.
Yeah.
And it was funny because we were up north just last weekend, and I get to the St. Sauveur exit and I stopped to put some gasoline, and I looked at all the cars. All the cars were filled to the brim with young, I don't want to say kids, but like kind of like young adults,
20s,
early 20s, just, completely fed up of COVID, completely fed up of, what's going on. And they were going up north to party. Mm-hmm. And where were they going? They were going to rented cottages.
Yep. My nephew rented a chalet last weekend.
There you go. Okay, perfect example. And how many of them were there in the chalet?
There were, I think, almost 10 people.
10 people. So that's one of the important things that you need to remember. When you're renting out your chalet, doing it the Airbnb style where, you do have insurance, you do have protection from Airbnb is a good idea. The other thing is you need to put limits. And if people do not respect the limits, they get kicked out. If you get into the habit of renting out your place, I would also suggest, I can't speak properly. I don't know if you hear I'm stuttering.
I didn't want
to. Anyways, I think I need a break to the country. But anyways.
It's the intermittent fasting.
Yeah, probably. So I think one of the things that you need to do is you need to put in proper security. Put in an alarm system.
Yep.
Put in, and these are things that people don't think about. It's my cottage. But it's a home, right? So put in the alarm system.
Camera outside.
Put in a camera outside and put a camera inside. A camera inside that could be shut down, obviously. Listen, I have them inside the house, right?
Yeah.
So the minute somebody comes to the house, the alarm is disabled, the camera is shut off. Mm-hmm. Right? It's as simple as that. If the alarm is not disabled, the cameras stay on. If there's something that happens, if fire alarms trip in the house, anything like that, the cameras go on. And this is important because you need to know what's going on in your place when you're not there.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to bring back an important point about insurance.
Yeah.
I have heard of some insurance companies not paying out claims if the damage was caused by a renter because you never mentioned to them that you were
renting it out.
It was supposed to be for you and your family.
Absolutely.
So you say, I got damage and all that, and it slips out that was a renter who caused that. Hey, you might not get covered.
That's right. It's very important that when you set up your insurance policy, that you set it up properly. Mm-hmm. To pay a little bit of a higher premium, if you will, because it's going to be rented. Number one, chances are it's going to be tax deductible, that premium that you're going to be paying, or a part of it is going to be tax deductible. But number two, you're going to be properly protected. A lot of times people kind of get bent out of shape and they're like, oh, I don't want to pay an extra $50 a year or $100 a year. But when push comes to shove and something happens, now all of a sudden they're like, I should have, could have, would have.
Yep.
Talking about kind of going into the winter time now.
Yeah.
Right? We've seen it happen.
Oh my goodness.
Pipes freezing, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah. At the very beginning, we used to turn off the heating.
Yeah.
We used to empty out the pipes.
Shh, don't say that. Insurance is listening. No, just kidding.
Well, when even if it was just for 1 week, we would turn off the heating, empty out all the pipes.
Yeah.
And it happened.
We would
once.
lower the heating.
Lower the heating.
Yeah.
And it has happened where we
froze.
forgot some water in the pipes and it froze, and we said never again. We'd rather pay the $100-$200 a month to keep it heated.
Yeah.
And so be it, rather than have damage.
Exactly. So you're right. Okay. So for us, we would drop the temperature in the house to about 17 degrees, which is kind of like the bare minimum of what you can actually keep it at in the winter. And then if you remember what I would do, because we would go up north to for the kids to ski and stuff on the weekends, what I would do, I would drive up on the Thursday night, I would turn the heating back on, and then I would come back to the city, and then on Friday when we would get there, the water, the heating would be on and the house would be warm. Completely inefficient use of my time, completely inefficient use of... So this is where technology and cottages, I find, go really hand in hand. And what I did is I changed all my thermostats in the house and I put Wi-Fi thermostats. So now when I want to drop the temperature in the house, I could do it remotely. If I want to raise the temperature, I could do it remotely. We have sensors in the house that basically monitor water, if there's water in the basement, if there's water anywhere, we get alerted to it, and then we can take necessary actions. Before there's any type of crazy damages that occur, we will know in advance about them. So I think one of the important things, and this is probably one of the big differences that we've had in previous years when we talk about cottages, just because of the advancements of technology.
Yep, that's
technology
true. Versus 12 years ago.
Exactly. Technology is going to be your best friend when you actually own a place.
Absolutely. And now the biggest question, is a cottage a good investment? Is it going to go up in price? Is it easy to sell? And, it's
not going to go up as fast as, you buy a house in the city versus you buying a country house. I mean, your country house is not going to go up as quickly as you think it will. But if you're the type of person that likes to get away every single weekend, and you're constantly going up to Mont Tremblant, you're constantly going to Saint-Sauveur, and you're constantly renting places up north, why not buy a country house? Mm-hmm. Why not take the plunge, into that lake of yours and, buy that country house? Because at that point, you're going to be investing in your future. Because don't forget, every mortgage payment that you make, we've talked about this before, there's a portion that goes to principal, a portion that goes to interest. So at least you know that there's some of that money that's coming back to you. Yep. And it will go up in value. It's inevitable.
Not as fast as a city home, but it will. Exactly. And we have to bear in mind, to sell it takes much longer. It does.
We've run out of real estate. You're listening to The Real Estate Show on CJAD 800. If you want to get a hold of us during the week, you can reach us at 514-680-4674. And of course, you could visit us online at northeastmortgages.ca. Have a blessed week, everyone. Love you all.